Well, there you have it, the continuous disruptions and chaos in the National Assembly yesterday running throughout the afternoon until early evening. It's pointing to the leadership of South Africa. Where are we headed? Where are we going wrong? How did we get here? And what kind of leadership do we need? I saw somebody saying that politicians are not all leaders. Some leaders become politicians. Now, let's discuss this further. I'm joined by political analyst Sanet Madonsela, leadership development practitioner Mhlanga, and the South African National Christian Forum's Bishop Marothi Mashashane. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today. Thank you very much for your time at this hour. Can I begin with you, Bishop? I've seen the statement that you've issued. It's a scathing statement after what happened in Parliament yesterday. In it, you are saying you are not going to stand aside and fold your arms when politicians make mockery of our democracy. So what happened in Parliament was mockery.
Thank you very much, Braden, for having us. Indeed, what happened in Parliament was a mockery of our democracy. They are not doing what we have sent them to Parliament to do on behalf of us. And instantly, they are also failing to hold President Ramaphosa accountable. And the ANC is repeating the very same game which they did when they were protecting the arrogance and wrongdoing of former President Zuma. So it is the time that we, as the society, we need to and also hold those parliamentarians accountable, because they account to us. They are representing us. In Section 92, it's very clear. The president, together with his cabinet, they are directly accountable to the parliamentary. They cannot go and answer elsewhere when they fail to answer to the parliament or the people representative whom they have elected them. It's like when you have done something wrong, Braden, there in eNCA, and the boss wants you to answer. You say, I can't answer to you, though you are my employer, I will answer elsewhere. It doesn't really make sense.
So you're talking, sorry, Bishop, to come in there. The line is not great. Your connection is not great, but stay connected. But what I'm hearing you're saying it's a mockery because the president is refusing to take accountability. Brian, let me bring you in here. There is a direct correlation between accountability and leadership.
Absolutely.
What did you make of what happened? Let's start there first. What are your overriding view about what happened in Parliament yesterday?
First of all, we've been here before. About 8 years ago, we were here with the eNCA scenario. It's the same script, different cost. We've been here, and there's nothing new about what is taking place. The similar actors. So Parliament did exactly what it did yesterday to the then president of the country.
And what does it say about leadership?
We've got no leadership. There's a lack of leadership. Actually, we don't have a strong leadership in the country at the moment.
Sanet, let me bring you in. Accountability, leadership. And when I saw what happened in Parliament yesterday, in fact, it started happening during my show in the afternoon after 2 o'clock, and we went through. And I was watching this, I was thinking, I was reminded by somebody who once said that not all politicians are leaders. I mean, we've got these MPs, these people who say they are politicians, but leadership is required, especially at a moment like this in the country. What did you make of what happened yesterday in Parliament?
So I believe that we have been here, as it is said before. South Africa has this habit. We keep choosing and redoing the same thing. This is exactly what happened with President Ramaphosa, is the same thing that happened with President Jacob Zuma. But more importantly, I think there's a bigger problem. South Africa makes use of what we call a representative, like proportional representation when we decide in terms of our votes. And as a result of that, whoever gets the most votes in the election then gets the most seats in Parliament. And because the ANC is basically a dominant party, it basically holds the majority of the seats in parliament, which means that it has over 230 seats. So regardless of whether or not people want to hold it accountable, it's basically impossible given the fact that they hold a majority of the seats. But more importantly, I think the difference between a politician and a leader is that a leader would put their people first, whereas a politician will serve the needs of the party. And I think one of the biggest problems with South African politics is the fact that people vote in accordance to the party, they toe the party line, so they don't necessarily put the country or their constituency first.
That's a very interesting point. We'll touch on that. Bishop, what would you have expected Ramaphosa to say yesterday?
We expected the president to come open hands. He's claiming that he is ready to take the country into confidence. You don't take people into confidence when you don't answer them or address the questionable scenario. We expected him to come clean and tell the story as it is, or even go to the extent of telling us what he have told the public protector or the Reserve Bank, and that would at least could give us a direction, whether he is still guilty or not guilty. But as long as he is accountable, he is claiming to be the man who is transparent. But what he is doing, he is not doing good for himself, not for this country, not even for his political party. They are shielding him on wrongdoing.
You've brought another word into this conversation, transparency. But we saw the presidency this morning, Sanet, coming out saying with a statement that the president was not ducking and diving. He was asked a particular question, whether or not he thought it was prudent to take the country into his confidence or not. So they are defending the president. What do you make of that?
I think that what happens a lot of the time is that their position is to protect the president, regardless of whether it is true or not. I do believe that President Ramaphosa wasn't actually answering the question. And just because you say that the question was answered doesn't mean that it actually was. A lot of analysts believe that Ramaphosa was saying a lot without saying anything at all. So I think that's where the nation is. When it comes to accountability and transparency, it actually means answering questions in a transparent manner, but President Ramaphosa doesn't want to do that, still hasn't answered some of the questions that were posed to him and was even granted extension. So I do think that at some point he needs to actually answer the questions and become more transparent in terms of holding himself accountable as the highest office in the country.
But are we being unfair to him if, for example, he says in his answer that he's not saying much about exactly what happened at Phala Farm? I've subjected myself to the legal investigation, Brian.
We are not being unfair. Actually, that's the least we are owed to as citizens of the country. Let's track back to when the public protector then, before she went on leave, asked him to submit his answers to those questions. Were they submitted on time? No, they were not submitted on time.
In fact, he got a couple of extensions,
yes,
that you remember. Yeah,
exactly, that was not submitted on time. Then let's go back to the Reserve Bank scenario. There were questions for him. Did he respond? No. So here we are.
So it looks like the way he's behaving, he could be hiding anything. Let's make it clear, though, that everybody in South Africa is innocent until proven guilty. The investigation is still underway by the law enforcement agency. But unfortunately for President Ramaphosa, politics is also about perception.
Absolutely.
And if people are perceiving like you are not answering, there is something, no matter what you say, they are not going to trust. Bishop, what about trust?
Indeed, there is no more trust because this is obviously taking us back. If somebody have stood publicly so and promised that I am a gentleman, I'm very smart, I will go to Marikana and apologize, I'll even take Malema to accompany me. Then 2 or 3 days down the line, the man did not stood by his word. The very same man, he is the one that stood and tell us about the 500 busasa in public, in Parliament. And the next thing, he hit a U-turn and say, no, I didn't mean that. The very same gentleman, he is the one who claimed to be transparent and to be trusted when he is approaching the court and say, don't disclose the CR-17. So this shows that the character of a man is now digging the hole for himself.
But what do we say then?
He's not that can be trusted.
What do we say to people like Mondli Kungubene, the minister in the presidency? We had a bite we played earlier. I don't know if any of you saw it, where he's saying in an interview that he believes that this was an attempt to embarrass the president. This is grandstanding. I mean, we see that they're protecting, as you say, the president. The president has not answered, hence we're talking about this. So the leadership collective, is it failing as well, Brian? When I talk about the leadership collective, I'm talking about the executive.
It is. I mean, an example of that was yesterday afternoon. Did you see how the speaker handled that situation yesterday? She got entangled into the whole conversation, into the whole debate. Her role as speaker, amongst many other things, is to maintain objectivity and to listen to everybody.
Impartiality
yes,
as well.
Yeah. And she didn't display any of those values and
Well, you know, how did it get here, Sanet? How do you think the country got to this place where we are now discussing this issue? Ramaphosa came on the ticket of a new dawn, the promise of a new dawn. Today we're sitting here discussing the Pala Farm scandal that we're still waiting to find out exactly if there were millions of dollars, as alleged, in the mattresses, in the couches and wherever else, if indeed people were kidnapped or not and made to bring back the money, if the money made its way to Namibia or not. We're still waiting for those answers and the investigation is still going on. How do you think the country got here where we have a leadership crisis today?
I don't believe that the South African leadership crisis is something that emerged overnight. I think it is something that it was coming for a long time. I think that we had a leadership vacuum for some time now, and I found it particularly interesting when President Jacob Zuma took the office. During the time when President Zuma became president, he had over 500 counts of corruption against him, and people still voted for him. And then when he was I don't want to say forced out, but kind of forced out. We were too excited to have someone else take over. And President Ramaphosa promised everything that the South African Republic wanted to hear. He promised a new dawn. He promised to move on corruption. He promised more transparency, accountability, and so on. And as a result of that, the South African population put its confidence in him, hoping that as a businessman that he would do the right thing. And given his track record in terms of business, a lot of people had the right to believe what he was saying. But I do think that it comes down to the voter again. I think that as the South African population, we are very forgiving, and we keep giving the African National Congress a second chance, a third chance, and so on. And at some point, I think the population is going to get tired of that. And you see it in the reduction of people voting for the eNCA. And I do think that with the upcoming elections in 2024, they are going to move below your 50%, and they're not going to be a majority party. And maybe that is what South Africa needs. Maybe then you'll have different parties coming together, forming a coalition, and actually doing the best they can do. Because if you're not active and you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you can be replaced by another party. So I think that maybe that is exactly what we need to just fill that leadership gap.
How did you get here? I mean, what's your view, Brian? You're hearing what Sanet is saying. It's been long coming. I mean, we do have a leadership crisis.
So we've always had contestations, we've always had contradictions within the party, the ruling party.
The governing party, the ANC.
The ANC, right? And so when there was a narrative that was driven by certain pockets of society that he was not part of the problems that the party was facing at the particular time. But when you look at his performance as the deputy president at the time, there is no distinction to that, right? So
and by the way, as deputy president, you are head of government business.
Yes, exactly. Actually, to add on top of that, he was actually on some of the parastatals, right? He was actually overseeing some of their operations and appointed some of those boards, right? So if you're to look at that, that already is telling us that it was a continuation. It's just that he was more palatable to certain parts and to certain pockets of society.
Like business, for example?
Like business and certain people, actually, yeah.
So that's where we are. Now, I want us to, as we head towards the end of our conversation, to talk about, we're talking about accountability, the calls are there. All of you seem to agree that that's important. Transparency is important. There's a loss of trust currently, the decline in trust in the man at the helm because of what happened in Parliament yesterday. But what kind of leaders do we need? I mean, Bishop, in your statement, you make some far-reaching kind of calls that you are making. You are even calling for an early election. I don't want to talk about that now. I just want to talk to you from your view as the National Christian Forum. What kind of leaders do you think this country needs now?
The country at the moment needs the leaders who are ethically honesty, transparency, and more than anything, we need leaders with vision. Politicians are not visionary, and therefore, if they don't have a vision, theirs is only to secure the votes. That is why they only reach out to people when they are seeking to secure the seats, the votes. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is an action. So actions are contradicting what they claim to be. So we cannot trust on them anymore. It is for that reason that we are calling the religious leaders, we are calling the traditional leaders to stand up now and rescue our country. This country is going down to the drain. No political party or politician will come to rescue us unless we stand on our own and save ourselves. The Messiah that you are waiting for, that Messiah is you. There's no other Messiah that will save you.
Citizens must take up the challenge. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, that it is up to you as a citizen. That's what the Bishop is saying. Brian, leadership is not a position. I hear that statement there, and I saw you sort of nodding. So what kind of leaders do you think this can take this country forward?
So the other view is that we get the leaders that we deserve. So the question we should be asking ourselves, or South Africa right now, is this the kind of leadership that we deserve? And going forward, what kind of leadership do we need if we don't need a kind of leadership that is this way inclined? Some people are talking about we need our leadership is full of geriatrics. Maybe we need a different type of leadership that does not have geriatrics. We need young people who are future fit, who are really agile and dynamic, and who are really concerned with social justice and the common good.
Sanet?
I totally agree with Brian. I do think as the youth, we do need to come out in numbers and vote for the kind of country and political leadership that we want to have. And I do think that we need people who are more results-oriented. I think we need to move past charismatic leaders to people who actually will deliver. And I think on the basis thereof, people need to look at councillors, whether they are performing at their level, and then you look at the next level of government and decide whether those are the kind of people that you want to have in power and so on. But we really do need to make better choices when we are voting. And I do think that young people do have the potential to bring about change. I just think that we need to just step up and take the opportunity.
Do you think we need a change in that as well, in that it looks like political parties, they've got these people who represent us in Parliament that we vote for every other 5 years, but they're not really representing our needs directly, because it's not a constituency-based kind of a system. You mentioned, Sanet, about maybe you need a new electoral kind of law, and there's been a discussion about the electoral amendment bill that you can bring in independent candidates even at the national level. But does the answer of good quality leadership lies in political parties? Sanet?
I do think that independent candidates would make a great contribution in terms of our current political system. I do think that it would be great because if you actually are able to vote for the person you want in power, they might be able to bring about change. But I do think that we might also incur problems with just having an independent candidate. So maybe we need to do further investigation in terms of this and then come up with a solution that might be better suited long term, as opposed to just going with what popular notions are or what could and could not work.
What do you think?
It's not just one solution. There is multiplicity to the solution that we need to bring to the table. So part of it has to do with the electoral system, but also some of the individuals that are coming into leadership and into power should not be there in the first place. So you've got people who probably don't even have a basic understanding of arithmetic, but they are in our leadership systems, and we're expecting them to help us understand arithmetic challenges. That's not working. So we're looking at it. We need people who can critically think, people who have creative thinking, systems thinking, and people who can really understand what it means to push social justice.
Bishop, finally to you, this is my last question to you. What are you going to be doing now as a National Christian Forum? In your statement, the scathing statement against what happened in Parliament yesterday, you are calling, for example, for early elections.
Definitely. We are busy with our lawyers compiling and drafting papers to approach the Constitutional Court, because the people we have elected, they are not representing us. We did not send them to Parliament to insult each other, calling each other names. They are not representing us. And therefore, at the moment, we do not have leadership.
You know, Thabo Mbeki, the former president of the ANC, spoke about the country being on autopilot. Sorry, we've just lost that connection there with the bishop. But that was my final question to him. Thank you very much, Bishop, if you can still hear me, but the connection is gone. The former President Thabo Mbeki speaking to ANC members, I mean, as a governing party, not once, not twice, several times, including just last week in Soweto at Mama Ritanzanga's memorial service, saying that there are many people who joined the ANC as a governing party because it was a ticket to a job, it was like a career, access to resources and stuff like that. So that's the issue there. That's why I was asking, Brian, especially I want your thoughts. I mean, does leadership only lie in political parties?
No, leadership does not only lie in political parties. It also lies even in business.
So citizens can take it upon themselves to be engaging and active in making sure that the country moves in the right direction.
Correct. As citizens of the country, we can actually demand accountability from the leaders because they are there to serve us. They are not there for themselves. And so those Ndikheteni, as Thabo Mbeki called them last week or 2 weeks ago.
Ndikheteni.
Choose me. Yes, Ndikheteni. Well, those kind of elements, once we identify them amongst our midst, then they should be rooted out because we realize that they are serving their own interests and not the common good.
Okay. What are the basic tenets of good, solid, wholesome leadership?
Justice, fairness, care, and wisdom.
And wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay. Sanet, just parting words for you as a young South African. 2024 is not far away. We're going to have to vote. But from a leadership perspective, who needs to step up? I had Bonang Mohale, the president of Business Unity South Africa, recently saying, when business does well, the country does well. Business leaders need to step up as well and make sure that the country progresses going forward. Any final thoughts about our leadership going forward, Sanet?
I do think that all of South Africa has an important role to play in terms of moving our country forward. I think that civil service, I think that civil society, NGOs, I think the youth, I think our elder people, and so on. We all have to chip in to make sure that we vote for the right candidates, that we actually vote for people who want to make a difference, people who will be results-oriented, people who would give South Africa the best of themselves. Because at the end of the day, as a leader, your job is not to enrich yourself, your job is not to make yourself look good. Your job is to ensure that your people are taken care of. And at the end of the day, whether you are a good governing party party is all dependent on whether or not you can render services that people need, because that's what people need. We need a well-functioning state. We do not need more antics. We don't need more charismatic people. We actually need someone who will get us out of this mess, someone who will be policy-driven, someone who will actually ensure that business has what it needs in order for it to thrive, that we have job creation, that the quality of our education actually needs what our labor market needs. So I think that there is a lot that needs to be taken into consideration. I think that we all have a responsibility to ensure that we direct our country. And one of the ways in which we can ensure this is by actually coming out, voting in numbers, and making sure that we actually vote for the right political party, and also take into consideration the kind of candidates that those political parties would put into office.
Now, finally, I see you came back, Bishop. We thought we lost you, and I'd asked you what I thought was a final question. But finally, this question has just popped into my mind now as we conclude. The church in South Africa, during anti-apartheid struggle, during the struggle against apartheid, played a very critical role in terms of supporting the struggle against injustice and supporting the struggle for social justice. Today, what do you think should be the role of the church in ensuring that we have the right type of leaders?
Indeed, the church needed to take part, if not to take leadership. I always say, what makes evil to triumph? It's when the righteous does nothing. When righteous do nothing, then the evil will escalate. The time is now that all religious leaders must forget to say they don't get involved on the political space. They are the ones who can rescue this country. This country needs men and women of integrity, God-fearing ones. They are the ones who can at least rescue this country.
Okay, thank you very much, Bishop. Thank you for that, and your connection again going away, but it was right at the end. Bishop Marothi Mashashane from the South African National Christian Forum, Sanet Madonsela, political analyst with UNISA, and in studio with me, leadership development practitioner Brian Mhlanga. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time over the last half hour or so when we're looking at the questions of leadership in our country post what happened in Parliament yesterday. Brian Mhlanga says, we've been here before, nothing new, but of course we need something new going forward. Still